was a still and eerie night, as it often was in the graveyard where I worked as a night shift caretaker. My name is Jack, and I've been tending to this place for years now. Despite the creepy ambience, I found solace in the tranquility of the graveyard, and I took my job seriously. My role was to ensure that everything was in order, keep the grounds tidy, and offer a sense of security to those who came to visit their departed loved ones. The clock struck midnight, and I began my routine patrol around the graveyard. The moon cast a soft glow on the tombstones, creating long shadows that danced in the gentle breeze. I carried a flashlight and a walkie-talkie to communicate with the security team. It was a quiet night, and the only sounds were the occasional rustling of leaves and distant hoots of owls. As I strolled through the rows of graves, I couldn't help but reflect on the stories of those buried here. Each tombstone held a piece of history, and I felt a certain responsibility to honor their memories. It was during one of these contemplative moments that I noticed something unusual, a faint light in the distance, near the oldest section of the cemetery. Curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to investigate. I approached cautiously, trying not to make any noise. As I got closer, I saw a figure standing by one of the headstones, holding a lantern. I quickly recognized it as Mr. Harris, an elderly man who often visited his late wife's grave during the day. Seeing him here at this hour was unexpected. "Mr. Harris?" I called out softly, not wanting to startle him. He turned towards me, and I could see a mix of surprise and sadness in his eyes. "Oh, Jack, it's you," he said with a sigh. "I couldn't sleep, so I thought I'd come and visit Margaret." "Is everything all right, Mr. Harris?" I asked, concerned for the old man wandering alone in the graveyard at night. "I just miss her terribly," he replied, his voice quivering with emotion. "It's been 5 years, but the pain never truly goes away." I nodded in understanding, having witnessed many people go through similar grief during my time at the graveyard. We stood together for a while, sharing memories of Margaret. Mr. Harris told me stories of their life together, their adventures, and their love that stood the test of time. As the night progressed, Mr. Harris decided it was time to head back home. I offered to walk him to his car, and he gratefully accepted. We made our way through the winding paths of the cemetery, the moonlight guiding our way. I couldn't help but feel a sense of responsibility towards the elderly man, knowing that he needed extra care and support. Just as we reached the entrance, we both froze. From the corner of my eye, I saw movement near one of the large oak trees that loomed over the graveyard. I turned to look, and Mr. Harris followed my gaze. There, standing in the shadows, was another figure, a person cloaked in darkness, barely visible against the night. "Who's there?" I called out, my heart racing. There was no response, just a fleeting silhouette that seemed to melt further into the shadows. Mr. Harris clutched my arm tightly, fear evident in his eyes. "I think we should go, Jack," he said, his voice shaking. I agreed, and we hurriedly made our way to his car. The figure didn't make another appearance, but the unnerving feeling of being watched lingered. I escorted Mr. Harris safely to his car, making sure he locked the doors before driving off. As I returned to my rounds, I couldn't shake off the unsettling encounter. Who could it have been? Was it just a curious passerby, or was there something more sinister at play? I contacted the security team and informed them of the incident, and they assured me they would keep an extra close eye on the graveyard that night. The rest of the night passed without any more unusual incidents, and the first rays of dawn brought relief. I finished my shift, and as the day crew arrived, I recounted the chilling encounter to my colleague, Sarah. She listened intently, offering her thoughts. "It's probably just some teenagers messing around," she suggested. "You know how kids can be, especially around spooky places like graveyards." Her explanation made sense, and I wanted to believe it was nothing more than a harmless prank. However, the feeling of being watched and the sudden disappearance of the figure troubled me. Over the next few nights, I remained on high alert during my patrols, but there were no further sightings of the mysterious person in the graveyard. As the weeks passed, the memory of that night faded, and I began to convince myself that it was indeed just a one-time occurrence. However, fate had a different plan. One night, As I was inspecting the newer section of the cemetery, I heard a faint rustling noise. My heart skipped a beat, and I shone my flashlight towards the source of the sound. There, standing behind a large monument, was the same cloaked figure. This time, I didn't call out. Instead, I observed quietly from a distance. The figure seemed to be hunched over, as if in deep sorrow or reverence. It didn't move, and I noticed a bouquet of flowers placed on a nearby grave. Curiosity and concern got the better of me, and I approached cautiously. As I got closer, the figure turned, revealing a tear-streaked face. It was a young woman, her eyes filled with grief. "Are you okay?" I asked gently, trying not to startle her. She looked up at me, her expression a mix of vulnerability and sadness. "I lost someone very dear to me," she whispered. "I come here every night to talk to him." I empathized with her pain, and we stood together in silence for a while. She shared stories of her loved one, recounting memories that kept his presence alive in her heart. I could sense the depth of her grief and the solace she found in the quietness of the graveyard. As the night wore on, she thanked me for listening and walked away, disappearing into the darkness. I didn't catch her name, but her sorrowful encounter left an indelible mark on my heart. In the following weeks, I continued to see her in the graveyard during my patrols. Sometimes, she would be sitting by a grave, her presence offering comfort to the departed soul. Other times, she would wander through the rows of tombstones, lost in her thoughts. I eventually approached her, and we struck up a conversation. Her name was Emily, and she had lost her husband in a tragic accident. The graveyard had become her sanctuary, a place where she could feel close to him and find peace amidst the turmoil of grief. As we spent more time together, I learned about the immense strength she possessed to endure the pain of loss. Emily's presence in the graveyard wasn't eerie or unsettling anymore. Instead, it felt like a testament to the power of love and the resilience of the human spirit. Over time, our paths crossed less frequently, and Emily began to heal. She found solace in the memories of her husband and moved forward with her life. I felt privileged. If you enjoy listening to horror stories for hours at a stretch, then you are at a right place. Subscribe nonstop creepypasta horror stories right away. Working as a night shift caretaker at the city park seemed like a peaceful job, but it had its eerie moments. My name is Mark, and for the past 6 months, I've been responsible for maintaining the park's cleanliness and ensuring the safety of its visitors during the night. Most nights were uneventful, but one chilling encounter changed everything. It was a cold autumn evening, and the park was unusually quiet. The rustling of leaves and the occasional hoot of an owl were the only sounds that broke the silence. I was used to the solitude, finding comfort in the darkness that enveloped the park. As I made my rounds, I couldn't shake off the feeling that I was being watched. The hair on the back of my neck stood on end, and a sense of unease settled in the pit of my stomach. I tried to brush it off, attributing it to my imagination running wild, but the sensation persisted. I continued my patrol, checking the swings, the play area, and the walking trails. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, yet the feeling of being watched only intensified. My flashlight cast eerie shadows on the trees, and I couldn't help but glance over my shoulder every few minutes. As I approached the small pond in the heart of the park, the atmosphere grew more tense. I noticed movement in the corner of my eye, and I turned quickly, expecting to find someone lurking in the shadows. But there was no one there. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my nerves. Maybe it was just the wind or some small animals scurrying around. I continued my rounds, trying to focus on my tasks and dismiss the eerie feeling that clung to me. As the night wore on, I became more on edge, jumping at every little noise. I decided to take a short break and sat down on a park bench to catch my breath. That's when I heard it, faint footsteps approaching from behind. My heart pounded in my chest as I turned around, my flashlight trembling in my hand. There, standing just a few feet away, was a man, tall and imposing, his face obscured by the darkness. "Can I help you?" I managed to stammer, trying to sound calm and composed. The man didn't respond, he just stood there, his eyes fixed on me. The silence felt deafening, and I could feel my heart racing faster with each passing second. "I'm the caretaker of this park," I continued, hoping to break the tension. "If you need anything or have any questions, feel free to ask." Still, the man didn't utter a word. Instead, he took a step closer, and I could see the glint of something metallic in his hand. Fear washed over me, and my mind raced with possibilities of what he might be holding. "Look, I don't want any trouble," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'll leave you alone if that's what you want. Just please, don't do anything." The man took another step forward, his expression unreadable. My heart pounded in my chest, and I felt the adrenaline surging through my veins. I knew I had to act quickly, so I slowly stood up, keeping my eyes on him. "Listen, I'm just doing my job," I said, my voice shaking. "I'm not here to cause any problems. Let's both go our separate ways, all right?" For a moment, it seemed like he was considering his options. Then, without saying a word, he turned and disappeared into the darkness. I watched him go, my breath catching in my throat. Once he was out of sight, I wasted no time in calling the police. When the police arrived, I gave them a detailed description of the man and the chilling encounter I had just experienced. They assured me that they would increase their patrols in the area and advised me to be cautious during my future shifts. In the following nights, I couldn't shake off the fear that he might return. The park, once a place of tranquility, now felt like a sinister labyrinth. I constantly looked over my shoulder, expecting to see the man lurking in the shadows. One night, as I was locking up the park entrance, I caught a glimpse of a figure standing by the tree line. My heart skipped a beat, but this time, it wasn't the same man from before. It was a woman, and she was staring at me intently. I approached cautiously, my hand reaching for my phone to call the police again. But before I could dial, the woman spoke. "You should leave," she said, her voice firm but tinged with sadness. "Why? Who are you?" I asked, my nerves on edge. "I'm someone who cares about this park," she replied cryptically. "But there are dangerous people here, and you need to be careful." Confused and frightened, I asked her to elaborate, but she remained tight-lipped. Instead, she turned and disappeared into the darkness, leaving me standing there, more bewildered than ever. As the weeks passed, I encountered her a few more times. Each encounter left me with more questions than answers. Who was she? What did she know about the man who had confronted me that night? And why was she so insistent that I should leave? I decided to do some digging, hoping to find answers to the unsettling encounters I had experienced. I researched the park's history, reaching out to longtime residents and local authorities. What I uncovered sent a chill down my spine. It turned out that the park had a dark past, plagued by drug deals and gang activity. The man I had encountered that night was rumored to be associated with a dangerous gang that used the park as a meeting spot. The woman, on the other hand, was once part of the gang but had left that life behind. She had seen my vulnerability and sensed the danger that lurked in the park. In her own way, she was trying to protect me, urging me to leave before I got caught in the crossfire. Armed with this knowledge, I made a difficult decision. I resigned from my position as the night shift caretaker at the park and moved to a safer location. The encounters at the park had left me with a newfound appreciation for the thin line between safety and danger, and I couldn't afford to take any risks. The park remains a chilling reminder of the dangers that can lurk in the darkness, and I often wonder about the fate of those who still visit it during the night. The chilling encounters I had experienced continue to haunt me, a cautionary tale that serves as a reminder to always be vigilant, even in the most peaceful-looking places. It was a cold and stormy night. The rain splattered against the windows of the office building, and the streetlights cast eerie shadows that danced across the floor. I sat at my desk, the glow of the computer screen illuminating my tired face. I had been working the night shift for months now, and though the solitude could be unnerving, I had never experienced anything out of the ordinary until that night. As the clock struck midnight, the office fell silent. The distant rumble of thunder echoed through the empty halls, and the flickering fluorescent lights added to the eerie ambience. it was during one of my breaks that I first noticed something peculiar. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of movement in the hallway. My heart skipped a beat, and I chalked it up to the stress and fatigue playing tricks on my mind. However, as the night wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. Around 2 or 3 in the middle of the night, I heard some faint whispers. At first, I dismissed it as the wind outside, but the whispers grew louder and more distinct. They seemed to be coming from the supply room down the hall. Curiosity mixed with fear urged me to investigate. With a shaky breath, I grabbed a flashlight from my desk drawer and made my way down the dimly lit corridor. As I approached the supply room, the whispers intensified, sending shivers down my spine. I hesitated for a moment before mustering the courage to push open the door. The room was pitch black, and the whispers seemed to originate from the far corner. "Hello?" I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. There was no response, but the eerie murmurings continued. I aimed my flashlight towards the corner, and what I saw made my blood run cold. A group of shadowy figures huddled together, their outlines barely distinguishable in the darkness. Panic set in, and I stumbled backward, dropping my flashlight in the process. The sudden clatter seemed to startle the figures, and they dispersed, disappearing into the shadows. My heart pounded in my chest as I fumbled to retrieve the flashlight. Once I had it in my hand, I cautiously pointed the beam back towards the corner, but there was nothing there. The room was empty. I couldn't believe what I had just witnessed, and I wondered if it was all a figment of my overworked imagination. Determined to find an explanation, I returned to my desk and searched the internet for any clues about what I had seen. I came across a few articles about shadow people, mysterious entities that supposedly lurked in the shadows and were often associated with paranormal encounters. I dismissed the idea, thinking it was all just folklore and superstition. As the night wore on, I tried to focus on my work, attempting to push the bizarre encounter to the back of my mind. But the feeling of being watched persisted, and every time I glanced down the hallway, I could swear I saw movement in the shadows. Was it just my imagination playing tricks on me, or was there something more to this? Around 4 a.m., I decided to take another break and went to the break room to make some coffee. As I waited for the machine to brew, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was behind me. I spun around, half expecting to see a coworker, but the room was empty. That's when I noticed the reflection in the microwave door, a dark silhouette standing just outside the break room. My heart pounded in my chest, and I turned to face the figure, but there was nothing there. I rubbed my eyes, trying to make sense of it all, but when I looked again, the shadowy figure was back, closer this time. It seemed to be reaching out towards me, and I stumbled backward, spilling hot coffee on my hand. Panicking, I rushed out of the break room and headed towards the security office. I needed to see if there was any footage of what I had just experienced. As I approached the office, I noticed the security guard was missing. I knocked on the door, but there was no response. I tried the handle, and to my surprise, it was unlocked. I stepped inside cautiously, calling out for the guard. The room was dark, and the security monitors displayed various empty hallways and rooms. But one screen caught my attention. It showed the break room, and I could see myself standing there, looking terrified. However, there was no sign of the shadowy figure I had seen in the reflection. As I continued to watch the footage, a chill ran down my spine. The security cameras captured something I couldn't see with my own eyes, shadowy forms moving throughout the office, lurking in the corners of the screen. The hair on the back of my neck stood on end, and I couldn't deny it any longer. Something inexplicable was happening. I hurriedly left the security office, determined to leave the building and never return. But as I approached the exit, I was met with resistance. The doors wouldn't budge. It was as if they were locked from the outside. Panic surged through me as I realized I was trapped. The night stretched on, and the shadows seemed to grow bolder, encircling me like vultures closing in on their prey. I tried to call for help, but my phone had no signal. I felt like a rat in a maze, with no way out. The building felt like a labyrinth, and the shadows were its malevolent inhabitants, toying with me, driving me to the brink of insanity. Finally, as the first rays of dawn broke through the windows, the doors clicked open. I wasted no time in fleeing the office, not looking back even once. I quit my job that day and vowed never to work the night shift again. To this day, I can't explain what I experienced that fateful night. The encounter with the shadows in the office haunts me, and I often wonder if I'll ever find answers. The night shift may have brought me face to face with the unexplained, and I can't help but fear that those shadows may not have been as benign as they seemed. The memories continue to haunt me, a chilling reminder that there are things in the world beyond our comprehension, lurking in the darkness, waiting to be discovered, or perhaps, waiting to be left undisturbed. My duties included locking up facilities, patrolling the grounds, and ensuring the safety and security of the park. One fateful night, as I began my shift, a feeling of unease settled over me. The park, usually a place of tranquility, felt unusually quiet and unsettling. I shook off the odd sensation and attributed it to the gloomy weather that shrouded the city. As I started my routine patrols, I couldn't help but notice how the shadows seemed to play tricks on me. Shapes in the darkness that appeared benign during the day now took on sinister forms. I tried to push aside my unease, focusing on the task at hand. It was around midnight when I heard faint whispers carried by the wind. I froze, straining my ears to catch any distinguishable words. The voices sounded distant, almost like echoes from another time. I assumed it was just people passing by the park, but I couldn't spot anyone in the vicinity. As I continued my rounds, the whispers grew louder and more insistent. The hairs on my neck stood on end, and a chill ran down my spine. The park was empty, but the voices seemed to surround me, echoing from the trees and bushes. I decided to investigate the source of the whispers, but they eluded me like ethereal wisps. No matter which direction I followed, the voices seemed to evade my grasp, always remaining just out of reach. I began to wonder if I was losing my mind, plagued by exhaustion and the tricks of my imagination. Just as I was about to give up, the voices coalesced into a hushed conversation coming from behind a cluster of trees. I approached cautiously, my heart pounding in my chest. As I drew nearer, the words became clearer, and I was able to make out two distinct voices, a man and a woman engaged in an intense argument. I hesitated, unsure if I should intervene or simply let them be. After all, it was not uncommon for couples or friends to have heated discussions in the park during the day. But the situation felt different, unsettlingly different. The darkness seemed to amplify their emotions, and I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was terribly wrong. "Please, just let me explain," the woman's voice pleaded, her tone filled with desperation. "No, I've had enough of your lies," the man retorted angrily. "I can't trust you anymore." Their conversation grew more heated, and I decided it was time to intervene. I called out, "Hey, is everything all right over there?" The voices stopped abruptly, and there was a moment of eerie silence. I cautiously approached the spot where I had heard them arguing, but to my bewilderment, there was no one there. The area was empty, and the silence was deafening. I rubbed my temples, trying to rationalize what I had just experienced. Maybe it was a couple of teenagers playing a prank on me, or perhaps my mind was playing tricks on me after hours of solitude. Determined to get to the bottom of it, I continued my patrol, keeping a close eye and ear out for any unusual occurrences. The whispers seemed to follow me, swirling around me like a haunting melody. Every now and then, I would catch snippets of conversation, but every time I tried to get closer, they would dissipate like smoke. As the night wore on, my nerves were on edge, and I couldn't shake off the feeling that I was not alone in the park. Shadows danced around me, and the flickering lights seemed to cast eerie figures on the ground. Around 3 a.m., as I approached a secluded part of the park, I saw a figure standing by the fountain. It was a woman, her back turned towards me. Her posture seemed tense, as if she was lost in thought or weighed down by some heavy burden. "Excuse me, ma'am," I called out, my voice trembling slightly. "The park is closed for the night. I'll have to ask you to leave." There was no response, and the woman remained motionless. As I approached her, I noticed she was wearing a tattered dress that looked like it was from another era. The whispers grew louder, and I realized that the words I had been hearing were not from living beings, but echoes of the past. My heart sank as I realized that what I had been experiencing were not the voices of people in the present, but a haunting echo of a tragic event that must have occurred in the park long ago. The woman I saw might have been a specter from the past, forever reliving her sorrow and anguish. I stepped back, my mind racing, trying to make sense of it all. Was it possible that the park held a residual energy from a dark episode in history? The stories of tragedy and mystery associated with the park suddenly seemed more plausible. With a mixture of fear and curiosity, I decided to research the history of the park, hoping to find any record of a tragic event that might explain the haunting echoes. As I delved into the archives, I discovered a disturbing tale from decades ago, a woman named Amelia, who had tragically lost her life in the very spot where I saw her standing. Amelia's death had been a mystery, and the case was never solved. Her ghost was said to haunt the park, trapped in an eternal loop, forever replaying her final moments. It was a chilling revelation that sent shivers down my spine. From that night onwards, I couldn't shake off the sense of being watched whenever I was in the park. The echoes of Amelia's tragic end seemed to linger, a constant reminder of the past that still haunted the present. I continued my job as the night shift caretaker, but the park held a new layer of mystery and darkness. The chilling encounter with the echoes of the past stayed with me, a haunting reminder that sometimes, the past refuses to remain buried, and its memories continue to echo through the ages. I had been the night shift caretaker at the gas station for over a year now. My responsibilities included refilling the pumps, cleaning the store, and being a welcoming presence for the occasional weary traveler who stopped for a late-night fill-up. The gas station stood isolated along a lonely stretch of highway, surrounded by dense woods on either side. The darkness of the night was only punctuated by the flickering lights of passing cars or the occasional sound of an owl hooting in the distance. The eeriness of the place had never bothered me before. After all, it was just another night, or so I thought. One particularly cold and quiet night, I was tidying up the store, restocking the shelves, and checking the coffee machine when the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. A sense of unease washed over me, as if I was being watched. I glanced out of the window, but the darkness outside revealed nothing out of the ordinary. Shaking off the feeling, I resumed my work. However, as the night wore on, that eerie sensation persisted, growing stronger with every passing minute. I tried to ignore it, attributing it to my tired mind playing tricks on me. That was until I heard a soft tapping on the window. Startled, I turned towards the sound. At first, I saw nothing but the reflection of the dimly lit store. But as I peered closer, I caught a glimpse of a figure standing just outside, partially hidden in the shadows. My heart pounded in my chest, and I instinctively reached for my phone to call the police. But before I could dial, the figure disappeared. I was on edge for the rest of the night, my senses heightened, and my gaze darting between the windows and the security camera monitors. There were no more signs of the mysterious visitor, but the unsettling feeling of being watched lingered. As the clock neared 2, I heard a loud thud coming from the gas pump area. I rushed outside to investigate, half expecting to find the figure from earlier. However, there was no one there. The pumps were undisturbed, and there was no sign of any attempted break-in. Confused and anxious, I decided to make myself a cup of coffee and stay vigilant until my shift ended. As I stood by the counter, my eyes were drawn to the security camera monitor showing the gas pump area. And that's when I saw it, a shadowy figure darting across the screen. My heart raced as I rewound the footage, trying to get a better look. The figure moved swiftly, staying close to the edge of the camera's blind spot. I couldn't make out any distinct features, but it seemed like a person, perhaps dressed in dark clothing. I called the police and informed them about the strange occurrences at the gas station. They assured me that they would send a patrol car to investigate. In the meantime, I locked all the doors and kept watch from behind the counter, my nerves on edge. While I waited, the power went out, plunging the gas station into darkness. I fumbled for a flashlight, my heart pounding in my chest. The sound of footsteps echoed from outside, slowly getting closer. My hands trembled as I dialed the police again, only to find that my phone had no signal. Feeling trapped and vulnerable, I decided to take refuge in the office, where I could barricade myself in if necessary. As I stepped into the narrow space, I heard a faint whisper coming from outside the office window. My blood ran cold, and I strained to make out the words. "Let me in." "I need help," the voice pleaded, but it sounded off, almost like a recording played on loop. I knew better than to open the door. The police hadn't arrived yet, and something was seriously wrong. My instincts told me to stay put and wait for help. Time passed agonizingly slow, and the sense of dread only intensified. Finally, the distant wail of sirens reached my ears, and I breathed a sigh of relief. The police had arrived. As the officers combed the area, they didn't find any signs of the mysterious figure, and there was no evidence of foul play. They suggested it might have been a prank or a transient wandering through. Despite their assurances, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The sun began to rise, and the gas station slowly returned to normalcy. The police left, and I stayed behind, trying to make sense of what had transpired. As I reviewed the security camera footage once more, I noticed something chilling. The figure had vanished from the screen at one point, as if it had somehow managed to avoid being recorded. Over the following nights, I couldn't shake off the paranoia and unease. Every creak, every shadow, and every noise made me jump. The gas station, once a place of routine and familiarity, now felt like a dark and sinister maze. One night, as I was locking up the store, I glanced over my shoulder and saw a faint reflection in the window, a shadowy figure standing just behind me. My heart raced, and I whirled around, but there was nothing there. I couldn't ignore the feeling that I was being followed. I feared for my safety, not knowing who or what was haunting the gas station at night. In the end, I decided it was time to leave that job, to leave behind the haunting memories and the chilling encounters. As I drove away from the gas station for the last time, I couldn't help but glance at the rearview mirror, half expecting to see that shadowy figure following me. The memories of those eerie nights will stay with me, a chilling encounter that remains unexplained and forever haunting. Working the night shift at a gas station was never my dream job, but it paid the bills. My name is Alex, and I had been stuck in this routine for nearly a year now. The graveyard shift had its perks, like fewer customers and some peace and quiet, but it also came with its fair share of eerie moments, especially on those desolate nights when the whole world seemed to be asleep. One fateful night, as I manned the gas station counter, I noticed a man standing outside under the flickering streetlight. He wore a long coat and a hat pulled low, making it hard to see his face. It wasn't uncommon to have late-night customers, but this man gave me an uneasy feeling. He stared at the gas station as if he were contemplating something. I shook off the unease and continued my work. A few minutes later, he walked in, his eyes never leaving me. I greeted him with a friendly smile, trying to ignore the chill that ran down my spine. "Good evening. Can I help you with something?" I asked, trying to sound as casual as possible. He mumbled something inaudible and moved towards the shelves of snacks. As he wandered around the store, I kept a watchful eye on him. It wasn't just his appearance that unsettled me, there was something about the way he moved, a strange fluidity that didn't seem quite natural. Finally, he picked up a few items and brought them to the counter. I rang up his purchase, and as I handed him the receipt, he looked at me with piercing eyes that seemed to bore into my soul. "You have a long night ahead of you," he said cryptically before leaving. I brushed off the encounter as a peculiar interaction with a random stranger. But as the night wore on, things took a darker turn. A series of unsettling incidents occurred that made me question whether this man was just a strange customer or something more sinister. Around 3, the gas station security camera caught something unusual, a figure lingering near the gas pumps, their face obscured by a hoodie. It was hard to make out any details, but their presence sent shivers down my spine. I called the local police non-emergency number to report the suspicious activity, but they assured me they would send a patrol car to check it out. I tried to focus on my work, but the unease lingered, and the minutes seemed to drag on. Around 3:30, I heard a loud bang outside, followed by the sound of glass shattering. Fear gripped my heart as I realized someone was breaking into the gas station's mini-mart. I immediately dialed 911, reporting the ongoing burglary. In the dim glow of the gas station's fluorescent lights, I saw a group of masked individuals ransacking the store. My heart pounded as I watched them grab cigarettes, alcohol, and cash from the register. The dispatcher assured me that help was on the way, but the burglars were swift. They knew exactly where to find the store's security cameras and disabled them in a matter of seconds. I stayed hidden behind the counter, praying that the police would arrive in time. Just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, the lights in the gas station flickered and went out. Panic set in, and I realized the burglars had cut the power. The darkness engulfed me, and the silence was deafening. From the shadows, I heard the creaking of the door and footsteps approach the counter. My heart raced as I held my breath, hoping they wouldn't notice me. Come out, wherever you are," one of them taunted, their voice low and menacing. I knew I couldn't stay hidden for long, so I mustered the courage to speak up. "Please, just take what you want and leave. The police are on their way." My words seemed to agitate them, and they started searching for me in the darkness. I tried to stay quiet, but the sound of my pounding heart felt deafening. I knew they were getting closer. Suddenly, the store's lights flickered back on. The burglars hesitated, unsure of what just happened. This gave me a moment to make a break for it. I ran towards the exit, praying that I could escape before they caught me. As I reached the door, I saw a familiar figure standing outside, the man in the long coat and hat. His presence struck me with dread, and for a moment, I considered hiding again. But I had no other choice. I burst through the door and ran towards him, hoping he could help. "Please, call the police," I pleaded, gasping for breath. He looked at me with those intense eyes, and for a moment, I thought he would turn me away. But then he nodded and took out his phone to make the call. Moments later, the police arrived, and the burglars were caught. The man in the long coat stayed to give his statement, and I learned that he was an off-duty police officer who had been investigating a series of robberies in the area. He thanked me for being vigilant and for reporting the suspicious activity earlier in the night. I couldn't help but feel grateful for his presence at the right moment, despite my initial apprehension towards him. As the sun rose, and the gas station returned to its usual state of calm, I reflected on the chilling encounter I had experienced. It was a reminder of the dangers that lurked in the darkness, but also of the unexpected allies we might find along the way. The night shift had never been scarier, but it had also shown me the strength that comes from facing our fears and the value of remaining vigilant in the face of danger. It was an ordinary Tuesday night, and I was settling in for my usual night shift at the abandoned warehouse. I worked as a security guard, tasked with patrolling the vast and desolate building that once housed a bustling factory. The job was monotonous, and the eerie silence often left me feeling uneasy. Little did I know that this particular night would become a chilling tale I would never forget. As I made my rounds through the dark and empty halls, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was watching me. My footsteps echoed loudly, creating an eerie soundtrack to my nervous thoughts. The flickering lights added to the ambience, casting unsettling shadows on the walls. At around 3 in the middle of the night, just when I thought my shift was progressing without incident, I heard a strange noise coming from one of the back rooms. I cautiously approached the source of the sound, my heart pounding in my chest. As I got closer, I could hear faint whispers and rustling, sending shivers down my spine. I knew I should have called for backup, but my curiosity got the better of me. With trembling hands, I gripped my flashlight tightly and pushed open the door to the room. What I saw next left me paralyzed with fear. In the dim light of my flashlight, I saw a group of people wearing dark robes, gathered around an intricate pentagram drawn on the floor. They seemed to be engrossed in some kind of ritual, chanting in a language I couldn't comprehend. The air was thick with an oppressive energy, making it difficult to breathe. I tried to back away slowly, hoping they wouldn't notice me, but the floor creaked under my weight, and their heads snapped in my direction. Panic surged through me, and I turned and ran as fast as my legs could carry me. Their sinister voices echoed behind me, sending a chill down my spine. I radioed for backup as I continued to sprint through the dark halls. Fear had consumed me, and I could feel my heart pounding in my ears. The warehouse felt like a labyrinth, and I was trapped in its claustrophobic grip. As I rounded a corner, I came face to face with a tall, shadowy figure. It was a man, but his face was obscured by a hood. He stood there, motionless, staring at me with cold, piercing eyes. I couldn't see his expression, but I could feel malevolence emanating from him. I quickly changed direction, trying to find an escape route, but it seemed like every turn I took led me deeper into the warehouse's maze. Panic and desperation washed over me as I realized there was no way out. I was trapped with these sinister individuals. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of running, I stumbled upon an old maintenance closet. I locked myself inside, hoping it would serve as a temporary sanctuary. My breaths came in heavy gasps as I tried to compose myself. I listened in horror as the sounds of footsteps and sinister whispers grew closer. They were searching for me, and I knew I couldn't stay hidden for long. My mind raced, trying to find a way to escape or to at least protect myself. With the adrenaline pumping through my veins, I remembered a loose ventilation shaft in the closet. It was a risky move, but I had no other option. I climbed up, hoping it could lead me to safety or, at the very least, away from the chanting figures. The darkness enveloped me as I crawled through the narrow, dusty shaft. My heart pounded in my ears, drowning out all other sounds. Time seemed to stretch indefinitely, and I began to question if I'd ever find a way out. Eventually, I emerged into a small, forgotten room on the other side of the warehouse. It seemed like an isolated storage area for old machinery. I stayed quiet, listening for any signs of the rogue figures. Minutes passed, feeling like hours, and when no one came, I mustered the courage to venture out. I made my way towards the warehouse's exit, trying to be as stealthy as possible. My mind was still racing, replaying the terrifying encounter I had just survived. When I finally stepped out into the cool night air, I breathed a sigh of relief. The world outside felt safe and familiar, a stark contrast to the horrors I had experienced inside the warehouse. I contacted the police immediately and gave them a detailed account of what had transpired. As the authorities investigated the warehouse, they found evidence of occult rituals and sacrificial practices. The people I had encountered were part of a dark cult that had been using the abandoned building for their sinister activities. The incident haunted me for weeks, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I started having nightmares and couldn't sleep properly. My supervisor offered counseling, but the scars from that night ran deep. In the end, I decided to quit my job as a night shift security guard. I couldn't bear the thought of returning to that place, knowing what had transpired there. The encounter changed my life, leaving me wary of the darkness and what might lurk within it. To this day, I am grateful for surviving that chilling night. It serves as a haunting reminder that evil can exist in the most unexpected places, lurking in the shadows, waiting to strike when you least expect it. And while I may have left that job behind, the memory of that chilling encounter will forever be etched into my mind, a cautionary tale of the terrors that can unfold in the darkness of the night. Working the night shift at a remote gas station was nothing like I imagined it would be. When I took the job, I thought it would be a quiet, uneventful way to earn some extra cash while studying for my degree. Little did I know that one chilling encounter would forever change my perspective on the graveyard shift. My name is Alex, and I've been the night shift caretaker at the gas station for about 6 months now. Nestled along a desolate highway, the station served as a beacon for weary travelers and truckers making their long journeys through the darkened roads. My duties included manning the counter, restocking shelves, and keeping the station tidy. One moonlit night, the clock struck midnight, and a chill ran down my spine as I stepped outside to take a break. The wind howled through the deserted parking lot, and the distant hum of passing cars provided a haunting soundtrack to the night. I took a sip of coffee, trying to stay warm as I gazed out into the darkness. As I looked down the highway, a figure caught my eye. It was a lone hitchhiker, standing on the shoulder with his thumb outstretched. I watched him curiously, wondering why someone would be hitchhiking at this hour in such an isolated area. The practical side of me urged caution. It wasn't safe to pick up strangers, especially on a desolate road at night. However, something about the hitchhiker seemed off. He stood unnaturally still, almost like a statue. I strained my eyes, trying to get a clearer look at his face, but the darkness obscured his features. The thought of someone stranded in the cold made me feel guilty, but my gut told me to stay put. As the minutes passed, I noticed a strange pattern. Every time a car approached the hitchhiker, he took a step back, retreating further into the shadows. It was as if he didn't want to be seen. My curiosity turned to suspicion, and I decided to call the local police to report the hitchhiker's presence. "Hello, this is Alex from the gas station on Route 66. I wanted to report a hitchhiker standing by the highway. He's acting suspiciously," I said to the dispatcher. "We'll send an officer to check it out," the dispatcher replied. I felt a sense of relief knowing that help was on the way. As I returned inside the station, I kept an eye on the hitchhiker through the security cameras. Minutes turned into what felt like hours, and I anxiously waited for the police to arrive. Finally, a police car pulled into the station, and an officer stepped out. I hurried to greet him, explaining the situation and pointing out the hitchhiker's location. The officer nodded and radioed for backup before approaching the man cautiously. I watched the encounter unfold on the security camera feed. The officer asked the hitchhiker a few questions, but the man seemed evasive, providing vague answers. I couldn't hear the conversation, but the hitchhiker's body language spoke volumes. He was tense, fidgety, and avoided making eye contact. More officers arrived, and they began searching the hitchhiker's belongings. As they did, I saw the hitchhiker take another step back, inching closer to the darkness that surrounded him. It was as if he was trying to escape, sensing that the walls were closing in. My heart raced, and I held my breath as the officers discovered something peculiar among the man's belongings, a knife, concealed in a hidden pocket. The tension in the air intensified, and the officers kept a close eye on the hitchhiker. Suddenly, the man made a dash for the nearby woods, disappearing into the darkness before the officers could catch him. A chase ensued, but the hitchhiker's familiarity with the area gave him the upper hand. He vanished into the night, leaving the officers with nothing but a chilling encounter. As the police searched the woods, they found a makeshift campsite where the hitchhiker had been living. It was clear that he had been hiding out there for some time, likely avoiding detection and contact with others. The knife, along with other suspicious items, raised concerns about his intentions. The police thanked me for reporting the hitchhiker and assured me that they would continue their search. However, they warned me to remain vigilant and to report any suspicious activity in the future. I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that lingered after the encounter. The rest of the night passed without incident, but I couldn't stop thinking about the chilling encounter with the hitchhiker. What were his intentions? Why was he lurking in the shadows, avoiding any interaction with passing cars? Was he dangerous, or was he simply trying to escape from something? As the days turned into weeks, the hitchhiker remained at large, and my unease grew. I became more cautious during my night shifts, constantly checking the security cameras and keeping the phone close by in case I needed to call for help. The experience had left a profound impact on me, and I couldn't help but feel a mix of fear and gratitude. Fear for the unknown dangers that lurked in the darkness and gratitude for the timely intervention of the police. To this day, I continue to work the night shift at the gas station, but I'm no longer oblivious to the potential dangers that come with the job. The chilling encounter with the hitchhiker taught me a valuable lesson, that the night is not as tranquil as it seems, and there's often more than meets the eye in the shadows of the darkened highway. It was an ordinary night, just like any other on my night shift as a caretaker at the Greenwood Cemetery. The moon hung high in the sky, casting a silvery glow over the tombstones. As I patrolled the grounds, I found comfort in the quiet solitude that surrounded me. The job was lonely, but I had grown accustomed to the peaceful atmosphere until that night. Around midnight, as I was making my rounds, I noticed a faint rustling sound coming from the bushes near the eastern edge of the cemetery. I dismissed it as a raccoon or a stray cat, but an unsettling feeling nagged at the back of my mind. I decided to investigate, not wanting to leave any potential disturbances unattended. As I approached the area, the rustling grew louder, and I could hear faint whispers carried by the night breeze. My senses heightened as I moved closer, and my heart rate quickened with anticipation. I wondered if it was just my imagination playing tricks on me, but the sound persisted, and it sounded like human voices. "Hello? Is anyone there?" I called out cautiously, hoping to scare off any intruders. The whispers stopped abruptly, and an eerie silence enveloped the graveyard. My instincts told me to retreat, but duty compelled me to continue my investigation. I walked slowly through the headstones, shining my flashlight in the direction of the bushes. Suddenly, I saw movement out of the corner of my eye. I quickly turned, but there was nothing there. The moonlight played tricks with the shadows, and I chalked it up to my mind playing tricks on me. However, as I turned to leave, I caught a glimpse of a figure darting behind a mausoleum. My heart skipped a beat, and I knew I couldn't ignore it any longer. I pursued the figure, feeling a mix of curiosity and unease. Whoever it was, they were not supposed to be in the cemetery after hours. I tiptoed quietly, trying to avoid alerting the intruder. My footsteps were muffled by the soft grass, but each crunch of leaves seemed deafening in the silence. I reached the mausoleum where I had seen the figure hide and peered around the corner. There, crouched beside a tombstone, was a young woman. She appeared to be in her 20s, dressed in torn and tattered clothes. Her hair was disheveled, and her eyes darted around nervously. She clutched a small backpack close to her chest, as if trying to protect it with her life. "Hey, are you all right?" I called out gently, trying not to startle her. The woman looked up at me with a mix of fear and desperation in her eyes. "Please, don't call the police. I didn't mean to cause any harm. I'm just looking for a place to rest for the night," she pleaded. I could see the desperation in her eyes, and my heart softened. I understood that homelessness was a real issue, and she must have sought refuge in the cemetery for safety and shelter. I nodded reassuringly and told her, "I won't call the police, but you can't stay here. It's not safe. Come with me, and we'll figure something out." Relief washed over her face, and she stood up, cautiously following me out of the cemetery. As we walked, she shared her story with me, how she had fallen on hard times, lost her job, and had no family to turn to. The cemetery, she explained, was the only place she felt safe and protected from the harsh reality of life on the streets. We reached the main gate, and I saw her off safely, making sure she had somewhere to go for the night. I gave her some money and a list of local shelters and organizations that could provide help. She thanked me with tears in her eyes, and I reassured her that things would get better. As I returned to my duties, I couldn't shake the encounter from my mind. The chilling part of the experience wasn't something paranormal, it was the stark reminder that even in a place meant for the dead, the living could be struggling just as much. The cemetery, usually a symbol of loss and mourning, had become a beacon of hope for someone in need. From that night on, I took extra care during my rounds, hoping that others like her would find the support and help they needed. My chilling encounter at the graveyard had taught me that beneath the solemn tombstones, there were human stories of struggle and survival, stories that deserved empathy and understanding. And as the night fell on the cemetery, I walked with a newfound appreciation for the living and the dead, knowing that in this solemn place, humanity's resilience and compassion could shine through the darkest of nights.